Everyone talks about blockchain like it's magic. Nobody talks about what comes after you actually understand it. Because once you do, once you see the gears turning underneath, you stop asking, should I trust crypto? And you start asking, why did I ever trust a bank to hold my money in the first place? On September 15th, 2008, Lehman Brothers collapsed. $600 billion in assets. Gone. Customers locked out. No warning. 2 months later, a person, or a group, going by the name Satoshi Nakamoto, published a 9-page document that changed everything. Not because it was complicated, because it was devastatingly simple. It answered one question that banks never could. What if you didn't need to trust anyone at all? That's what blockchain actually is. Not magic, not jargon, a trust machine. And in the next 6 minutes, you're going to see exactly how it works, and why that terrifies every institution that profits from you trusting them. Here's how money has worked for literally thousands of years. You earn it. You hand it to someone else to hold. You trust that they won't lie, steal, or collapse. That's it. That's the whole system. A ledger, basically a fancy spreadsheet, sits inside a bank. It says you have $3,200 in checking. You never see it. You never touch it. You just believe them. And 99% of the time that works fine. But that 1% has wiped out entire economies. Argentina's 2001 banking crisis, Cyprus in 2013, the government literally froze bank accounts and took a percentage of people's savings overnight. Called it a bail-in, not a bailout, a bail-in. They reached into your account in 2013 in a modern European country, and there was nothing you could do about it. Why? Because the ledger, the record of who owns what, lived inside a building controlled by people with their own interests. You had no copy. You had no key. You had no choice. You just had to trust. And trust, it turns out, is a single point of failure. So smart people have tried to fix this for decades. The obvious answer seems simple. Just make multiple copies of the ledger. If 10 banks all have the same spreadsheet, no single one can cheat, right? Banks tried this with SWIFT, the global messaging network connecting over 11,000 financial institutions. Built in 1973, still running today. And it's basically a fax machine trying to compete with email. It takes 3 to 5 business days to send money internationally. It costs anywhere from $15 to $50 per transfer. And in February 2016, hackers used SWIFT to steal $81 million from the Bangladesh Central Bank in a single weekend. Multiple copies. Same problem. Because those copies were still controlled by trusted intermediaries, closed systems, human gatekeepers. Every attempt to improve the old system just added more complexity on top of the same broken foundation. More middlemen, more fees, more single points of failure wearing different masks. The real problem was never the technology. It was the architecture. Centralization itself was the vulnerability. Here's the core problem. And this is the insight that makes everything click. Whenever you have a central authority, one bank, one server, one company, you have what engineers call a trusted third party. And trusted third parties fail, not always, but inevitably. They get hacked, they get corrupt, they get regulated into doing things that hurt you. They go bankrupt. Mt. Gox was handling 70% of all Bitcoin transactions globally in 2013. Then in February 2014, it collapsed. 850,000 Bitcoin. Gone. Why? Because even in the crypto world, people recreated the same centralized architecture they were trying to escape. They handed their keys to someone else. They trusted a third party. The pattern repeats because the instinct to delegate trust is deeply human. But delegation creates hierarchy. Hierarchy creates gatekeepers, and gatekeepers, given enough time and enough money, always eventually abuse their position. You can't fix a broken trust model by adding more trust. You have to remove trust from the equation entirely. That's not a philosophical statement. That's an engineering specification. And it's exactly what Satoshi figured out in 2008. Okay, here's where it gets real. Imagine a Google Doc. Except instead of Google owning the server, the document exists simultaneously on 15,000 computers around the world. Every single computer has an identical copy. When you make a transaction, say you send $50 worth of Bitcoin to a friend, that transaction gets broadcast to all 15,000 computers at once. Now here's the genius part. Before your transaction gets added to the document, thousands of those computers independently verify it's legitimate. They check. Does this person actually have the funds? Is the signature valid? Does this follow the rules? If the majority agree, and they run the math to prove it, your transaction gets bundled with other verified transactions into a block. That block gets a unique fingerprint, a cryptographic hash. And here's the lock and key moment. That fingerprint includes the fingerprint of the block before it, which includes the fingerprint of the block before that. All the way back to block number 1, the Genesis block, mined by Satoshi on January 3, 2009. It's a chain of blocks, blockchain. Change one transaction anywhere in the chain, even one number, one letter, and every fingerprint after it breaks instantly. To cheat this system, you'd need to redo the math on every block simultaneously while controlling more than 50% of all computing power on the network. Right now, that would cost you over $20 billion and it would still probably fail. That's not trust, that's math. Math doesn't have a bad day. Math doesn't take a bribe. So what does this actually change for you? Everything and nothing. Look, blockchain doesn't automatically mean your money is safe. It doesn't mean every crypto project is legitimate. There are scams, there are failures, there are coins worth less than the electricity used to mine them. But here's what blockchain does do. It lets two strangers on opposite sides of the planet exchange value, real value, without asking anyone's permission. No bank approving the transfer, no government freezing the account, no corporation deciding whether your transaction fits their terms of service. In El Salvador, 70% of the population had no bank account in 2021. Then they made Bitcoin legal tender. Suddenly, a farmer in a village with no bank branch could receive money from a relative in the United States in 10 minutes for a fraction of a cent in fees. Not because someone was generous, because the math doesn't discriminate. Because the protocol doesn't care if you're wearing a suit or working a field. Here's the part most explainer videos skip. Understanding blockchain is step 1. The step nobody talks about is what you do with that understanding. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people who understand decentralization then immediately deposit their crypto onto a centralized exchange. Coinbase, Binance, FTX. Remember FTX? November 2022? Sam Bankman-Fried. $8 billion in customer funds. Gone. Not because blockchain failed, because people handed their keys to a trusted third party, again, and recreated the exact vulnerability blockchain was designed to eliminate. There's a phrase in this space that is not a suggestion. It is a law. Not your keys, not your coins. If you don't hold the private key to your wallet, the cryptographic password that proves ownership, then you don't actually own anything. You own an IOU from a company that might not exist next year. The whole point of Satoshi's invention was that you don't have to trust anyone. But that power only activates when you take actual custody of your assets. Which brings me to the most important practical step you can take after watching this video. If blockchain taught you anything today, it's that custody matters. Self-custody. The ability to hold your own keys without trusting a company, a platform, or a person to hold them for you. The tool that makes this practical is a hardware wallet. Specifically, I've been using the Ledger Nano X for the past 2 years. Here's why it matters. A hardware wallet stores your private keys on a physical device that never connects directly to the internet. Even if your computer gets hacked, even if malware is running on your laptop right now, your keys stay isolated on that chip. The hacker gets nothing. Ledger supports over 5,500 cryptocurrencies. The Nano X connects via Bluetooth to their mobile app, and setup takes about 15 minutes. This isn't sponsored hype. This is the logical conclusion of everything we just talked about. You spent 6 minutes understanding why decentralization matters. Spend $79 to actually use it. The link is in the description. It's the same device I use, and it's the single most important hardware purchase I've made in crypto. Beyond the wallet, here's how you replicate the mindset shift. Stop asking, is crypto safe? Start asking, am I holding my keys? Stop trusting platforms because they have a nice app. Verify, audit, self-custody. Learn the difference between a hot wallet and a cold wallet. Understand what a seed phrase is and why you never type it into any website ever. These aren't advanced concepts. They're the basics that the industry doesn't want to make too loud because exchanges profit when you leave your coins on their platform. Now you know. Act accordingly. You came in here with a buzzword, blockchain. You're leaving with a framework. Trust is a single point of failure. Math doesn't take a bribe, not your keys, not your coins. Satoshi didn't build Bitcoin because it was cool. Satoshi built it on January 3, 2009, in the wreckage of a global financial collapse caused by the very institutions people trusted most, because trust had failed catastrophically, and someone decided to replace it with math. That curiosity loop we opened at the start? Banks aren't terrified of blockchain because it's complicated. They're terrified because it's simple. Simple enough that you, sitting wherever you are right now, can hold your own assets, verify your own transactions, and participate in a financial system that asks nothing from you except a private key. That's the revolution. Not the price charts, not the Twitter hype, the architecture. If this clicked for you, share it with one person who still thinks blockchain is just Bitcoin stuff. Subscribe for more no BS crypto clarity every week. Hardware wallet link is in the description. And remember, disclaimer. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing constitutes professional advice of any kind.